This KFAN podcast is sponsored by Builders and Remodelers, exclusive Twin Cities provider of Elements Windows. Get the highest quality windows at unmatchable value. Visit buildersandremodelers.com for more details.
At Designer Shoe Warehouse, we believe that shoes are an important part of, well, everything.
From first steps to first dates, from all-nighters to all-time personal bests.
From building pillow forts to building a life.
For all the big and small moments that make up your whole world, DSW is there. And we've got just the shoes. Find a shoe for every you from brands you love at brag-worthy prices at your DSW store or DSW.com.
Career changers, including veterans and active duty service members. Your transition starts here. Go from GI to IT in a matter of months. Become a certified cyber warrior with training at My Computer Career. Cybersecurity specialists are in high demand, offering IT pros great opportunities and a rewarding lifestyle while protecting our people, liberty, and treasured institutions from cyber threats. Deploy your career in IT today. Learn more at mycomputercareer.edu/CWP. SkillBridge and other VA benefits are available to those who qualify.
Let your imagination take flight with an AI-powered PC from Lenovo. Whether it's creating digital art, designing new software, or building a portfolio for a future career, our PCs are powered by Intel Core Ultra processors to help students unlock smarter learning and unleash their creativity. That's the power of Lenovo with Intel inside. All you have to do is choose the one that fits your passion. Head to Lenovo.com to shop AI PCs and find your perfect companion. Plus, get 5% off when you create an education account.
Head over our contest page at KFAN.com. Enter for your chance to win a 2-night stay at Breezy Point Resort for 4, including golf. All thanks to Custom One Exteriors. That's KFAN.com, keyword contest center today.
Since we've had, I guess we got elevator issues going on right now.
No way. Is he stuck?
Well, he's not stuck, thankfully. Have you ever been stuck in the elevators?
I've been slammed, as in it like caught on something. It scared me to death, but it didn't get stuck. No.
Oh, okay. I had, but it's been almost a decade now, so it's not. I don't have a phobia of elevators or anything like that, but I did about it's 8-9 years ago now. I spent hour and a half stuck. One of our coworkers, she was expecting, and it was truly an any day type of thing.
Oh
now,
boy!
I didn't have my catcher's mitt with me, and there was no attention required. So we got out of there alive. But for me it took about 20 minutes being stuck on the elevator, where you kind of at least start to think, like, when's this ride going to end here?
Mm-hmm.
And, we had cell reception and things. It wasn't like worst case scenario after worst case scenario taking place in a movie or anything, but a little claustrophobic. That elevator gets small.
Would you be more worried about to me, I'd be more worried about it just suddenly dropping, even though that's the most irrational of fears, because I'm sure there's 1,000 safety measures. But that to me is like I'm hanging 5 stories up by a string right now for an hour.
Yeah, I guess, and it's not even an intentional thing. I just naturally my mind doesn't go to how bad could this possibly get. But it does after a while. You're just kind of bored with this now. We can get out anytime now, and it's not a fun experience for anybody. Now you do get a gift card.
Oh, really?
You do get a gift card. You get stuck in the elevator. You get a little gift card, little money for your trouble. So
I didn't get anything.
Ben Goessling is not physically stuck in the elevator, which we are all happy about. But I believe the issue would have been more access-wise, potentially. But weekly guest brought to you Standard Heating and Air. It's Ben Goessling of the Star Tribune, at Ben Goessling. Sorry about that.
Yeah, it's all right. It's apparently Chad Abbott came to the rescue and got me back up here. So
you don't have a key card?
I do not have a key card, no.
Wow.
Apparently we need to either do that or it must have been on some different security setting that
we're going to need
couldn't get up there.
Well, Lavelle has a key card.
Yeah.
You should probably get a key card.
I probably should get a key card. Okay. That's probably true.
We'll talk to Abbott about it. I can't imagine. Okay. So you got in.
Yep.
And everything's good.
Everything's good.
Ben Goessling covering the Minnesota Vikings for the Star Tribune, startribune.com. Follow him at Ben Goessling via X. And I guess switching the gears to a less frivolous topic, you and Mark Craig wrote a piece yesterday, or came out yesterday, about the passing of Jim Marshall. PA and I were on site for a charity golf tournament with the Purple yesterday. Great work by you guys covering it. Royce put out something as well.
Yeah.
And we could feel kind of the emotional reverberation while interacting with people at the golf course yesterday. And I did liken it a lot, and it's kind of sad that you're kind of getting to this stage in time now where a lot of legends, a lot of icons, they're not spring chickens anymore.
Right.
And, whether it was Bud just more than maybe 2 years ago now, somewhere in that neighborhood, and then Jim Marshall yesterday getting the news, or 2 days ago, and talking about it more in earnest yesterday. Just sad stuff for the Purple. Jim Marshall, certainly an indelible mark on that franchise, and you'd have to say, whether it's HOF conversations and all of that, but an all-timer, certainly in franchise history, and a lot of people were feeling it yesterday, and, you see it from the covering side.
Yeah, it certainly is one of those that leaves an impression and leaves a mark when that person is gone, because it was what he meant to that team. I mean, everybody referred to him just as the captain. I mean, he was the guy that was always there, never missed a game. Fran Tarkett did the video he put out, said he never missed a practice either, and I can't imagine that he would have. And so for Bud Grant's teams that have such an aura to them, such a certain way of going about things, that this was a standard that does not get deviated from. Jim Marshall was the guy that lived that as much as anybody. I mean, I think you can look at Alan Page, you can look at Carl Eller, you can look at certainly Fran Tarkett and Chuck Foreman, Ahmad Rashad, Mick Tingelhoff, all of the names, all of the legends, Paul Krause on those teams. But Jim Marshall, for Bud Grant's perspective, was the guy that made that whole thing work. So if Bud was the one saying that about Jim Marshall, that carries quite a bit of weight. So it's that and the fact that he was still around as much as he was. He lived in Minnesota. Royce's column was kind of telling some stories about Jim Marshall's life in Minnesota, both with the Vikings and since then. And I can remember at U.S. Bank Stadium the last few years, people probably, if you've been to a game at U.S. Bank Stadium, you remember that intro where Jim Marshall would read a poem that he had written called The Heart of a Viking. And that was always the thing that would be, I mean, they've changed the intro a couple times in the last few years, as they do, but that was the intro to when they're starting to bring everybody out on the field. And, and when the visitors would come out, it would be like, to those who would try to take this field, know the men that you meet are more than themselves. It was kind of this whole thing. You can find it on YouTube with the Vikings players intros if you haven't been to the game, but his voice was very much still part of the pregame, kind of mystique at US Bank Stadium. And they were trying to call back to that era. And it was not, for all of the times we've heard Alan Page's, kind of mythic voice over the years, it was not Alan Page doing that. It was Jim Marshall. So that voice, that sort of swagger, that just way of going about things that he had was something the Vikings still very much wanted to tap into even later in his life. So he is a guy whose presence is unmistakable in this organization. The captain's wall thing they put up last year, basically it's a picture of him and then a list of every captain in Vikings history and pictures of the current captains. Sits outside the locker room. They want to make sure he is remembered, and certainly he will be by very many people going forward. But yeah, one of those that's a pretty big loss.
I was talking, PA and I were chatting about this yesterday, and it just it popped in my head. And it just, when you mention, the way that they try to keep him remembered.
Yeah.
I wonder, and I wondered this yesterday, I still wonder it, if guys like Jim Marshall, he felt it at the end of his life, where coming around the organization, he's part of, like you mentioned, promotional materials.
Yeah.
And they put him on a pedestal as, and a very worthy one, as an example.
Yep.
Of what greatness is in the lore of the Vikings organization. Yeah. I just wonder if at the time, when you think about just the different existence or universe of the NFL back then, if some of these guys were conscious of that, if they knew, what this was potentially building into, if they were truly, because nowadays everyone's conscious of legacy. As a matter of fact, part of the reason that it's an actual motivating, it's a pillar factor in why some of these guys play the extra season.
Yep.
Or they go in a certain direction. It is part of legacy. It's part of every single conversation. But back then, I can't imagine that it was talked about in the same way or thought about in the same way.
Yeah.
I mean, not too far removed, the idea of guys having separate jobs in the off seasons.
Yep.
And certainly Super Bowl fanfare and such, they were a part of 4 of them. So obviously they would have to feel that they had left their mark on the fabric of the league, but still not in the totality that became. I just, it'd be, I know we don't have time machines here, but it's just always fascinated me where other certain players have, they've wanted more of a legacy. Maybe they feel like there wasn't enough of spotlight, and maybe there's a money aspect to that as salaries are much different than now. But, the humility that you would see when you would interact with these guys in person, like a Jim Marshall. You just can't imagine that this was a guy obsessed with legacy. Like, this is a guy that loved the game and loved doing what he did.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think, you think back to when those teams were in Super Bowls, and the Super Bowl as a cultural event was not what it is now.
No.
And it just, neither of us were alive, but you look at...
They played one at Rice.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's those kinds of things. It's having a marching band as the halftime show, and now it's like... you get the biggest pop stars in the world doing the halftime shows for these things.
I'm kind of pro marching band. If we went back to marching band, I'd be cool with that.
There's a quaintness to that whole thing that would probably be fine in some cases. But right, wrong, and different, it's not going back to that. And the spectacle of the whole thing is almost unrecognizable from what it would have been then. So for those guys to look forward and say, it's going to become this. I'm not sure anybody could have predicted that, because the scale is just so much bigger. It's so grandiose. I mean, the technological advancements of things that did not exist when those guys were playing is not a small part of this, obviously. I mean, the fact that we have the ability to consume the NFL in any medium we want instantaneously, and it can be this ubiquitous force in our lives, is true because of things like the internet and smartphones and television, at least cable television, that we did not have back in those days. So I'm not sure those guys could have conceived of it in a way that was anywhere close to appreciating what it would become. But yeah, it is so different. I mean, you'll hear stories about, I'm trying to remember who told this story of, it might have been Franz Harkinson. It's like they'd win a game at Met Stadium, and they're like sitting in the parking lot in somebody's car, just having a couple beers and listening to the afternoon game on the radio to say, okay, where are we going to be in the playoffs? I mean, just the idea that the franchise quarterback of the Vikings, the greatest quarterback in Vikings history, is, out with a couple of teammates, just having a couple of cold ones after a afternoon at the ball yard is just so different than what you would see now. And to trace from that to what it is now, I think would have been hard for those guys to imagine. I hope they look back on it and are appreciative of their role in it. I mean, there's a lot of bigger discussions there about the health of players and the physical toll that the game took on the guys of that era, and how many of them have had major health complications, if not serious maladies from playing football all of those years. I mean, that is part of this conversation as well. But for a guy like Jim Marshall that did live to be 87, I hope he was able to get a sense of his hand in all of this, and his hand in kind of what the Vikings have become and what they mean to people in the state.
Yeah, and it's, everybody, whether it was Fran, had him on yesterday. Randall McDaniel didn't play with him, but they had a relationship post Marshall's career, of course. HOF for McDaniel. Stu Voigt had a conversation with him yesterday. It's just Why isn't he in the Hall of Fame? It's ridiculous. And the commonality between all of them is what you were talking about. If, Bud giving him the praise that he gave him, Fran, most important Viking in the history of this team. That's how they look at him. He's not in Canton. And it's a flawed system. We all get that.
Yeah.
It's almost, and it's sad, but in some ways, his passing could almost potentially re-enter him into a conversation posthumously to where he's potentially considered. I don't even know how that process works at this stage.
Yeah.
But people still really hung up on the fact that of all of his accomplishments, would have liked him to win a ring. He did not. But all the same, they're like this insane Iron Man that was Jim Marshall. He's done everything you needed him to do, and nobody let him into the party.
Yeah, it is. It's one of those things that so Frank Cooney, who covered the Raiders, back in the John Madden era and would have covered that Super Bowl, the last one the Vikings played, has a really good newsletter and wrote about Jim Marshall yesterday. And one of the things that he talked about was there is this, he's been a Hall of Fame voter, and the seniors committee now would be the one that has jurisdiction over players like Jim Marshall. And one of the things that Frank Cooney talked about in his newsletter is there's getting to be this seniors abyss where there's this bottleneck of players that didn't get elected in the modern era because the modern era vote, typically it's a max of 5 a year, and it does tend to skew toward more modern players. So you get these guys that have to wait and wait and wait, and then it goes to the senior committee, and then there are more players than spots in a year. So guys like Jim Marshall end up in this kind of this thing where you're trying to push the boulder up the hill and hoping it goes over the top one year, and it just keeps coming back down. And he's been a semifinalist the last couple of years in the senior committee, but hasn't gone any further than that. So I think there's still quite a bit of work for him to get in, and I think the Vikings have been more involved in that over the last few years. I know Mark Craig, who has a Hall of Fame vote in this market, has had a lot of conversations with them about Jim Marshall's candidacy and his worthiness of being in the Hall of Fame. I think, it's things like, probably playing next to Page and Eller, who got more accolades, and maybe, you look at the numbers. Pro Football Reference has gone back through and looked at the sack numbers for all of those guys, which are just insane. I mean, Marshall is like 130 for his career, and I think he's third on that defensive line. So it's a different world, certainly, but the numbers are so big that I wonder if that was part of it. One of the things Cooney also talked about was in a couple of those Super Bowls, the Raiders, and certainly in that last one, the Raiders ran at him quite a bit. So there may have been voters at the time that looked at him and said, yeah, my memory is some of those Super Bowls he didn't play particularly well against the run, and he kind of got exposed a little bit there. So I do wonder how many of those things come into the conversation for people that were voting about him or voting on him early in his candidacy. But yes, I mean, the consecutive game streak, the production on the field, what he meant to those teams, the endorsements from guys that are no doubt Hall of Famers, Gold Jackets like Bud Grant, Fran Tarkenton, Alan Page, Carl Eller, all of these players that speak so highly of Jim Marshall. You would think that would help him break through at some point. It's a shame that it didn't happen in his life, but yeah, it is. It's one of those things, one of those players in Vikings history that I think there's still a lot of people in the organization that would very much like to see him enshrined in Canton, even if it's posthumously.
Well, terrific work by you and Mark Craig and Royce for your work at the Star Tribune and kind of highlighting that, and just kind of, I hate to say it kind of came out of nowhere for me. I know that those, I talked to several people yesterday who knew him much more intimately, that sadly he was kind of on the grind it sounded like the last couple of years. So now at peace, but certainly massive news for a guy that kind of helped build the foundation of the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings who are currently in OTAs, mandatory minicamp, I believe, is next week. And then they kind of just shoehorn that in between 2 OTA weeks.
Yep.
Maybe so some people could just maybe take a couple days off. Yeah. A couple injury days, maybe an early vacation before training camp starts. End of July. What are you gleaning as you follow them? A couple of media days that you've had the opportunity.
Yeah, we've had 2 so far, and we'll be there every day next week.
What drives you now? What are you? I mean, it's the obvious JJ talker, which I have some things for you on that, but just in general with this team, you're re-up in Van Ginkel, and just vibes are super positive right now, as it should be. Nothing's on the line at this time of the year, but what's hitting you right now with OTAs and Egan?
Yeah, I mean, JJ is the obvious, storyline there, and you're kind of watching everything that he's doing. But I think one of the things I've noticed beyond that, and we can certainly loop back to JJ, would be there is, you can get only a limited sense of this in OTAs because nobody has pads on yet. But there is, I think, between Jordan Mason and Aaron Jones and the upgrades to this offensive line, it does look like a team that wants to be more physical, more able to carry out some of the talk that Kevin O'Connell had about play style last year. I mean, play style basically became shorthand for we want to be able to punch you in the mouth when we need to do it. And I do see there's more physicality up front. There's certainly going to be that with Jordan Mason running behind that line. And, it still has been without Will Fries because he's been coming back from that tibia fracture. So they're not at full strength there yet. But I do think just the way they want to play is going to look a little different in that sense. And you could argue some of that is because you have a rookie quarterback and you need to kind of support him that way. But I think it goes beyond that. I mean, we heard a lot of that talk from Kevin O'Connell last year. I think he certainly has watched teams kind of bring this back around in the sense that everybody's playing two deep shells. Everybody is playing light boxes. Everybody's daring you to run the ball.
Yeah.
And when you have Justin Jefferson, you're going to get those looks all the time because everybody's going to say, we're not letting number 18 beat us. So the ability to say, fine, we are going to run it down your throat and your offense is going to be on the field for 23 minutes unless you bring a safety down and then all of a sudden Justin Jefferson has more space in the secondary. I think they are aware of that. I think they are intent on trying to exploit that and get more out of that running game to make it a better counterpunch that does a number of different things. And I just from watching to this point, it does seem like there's more commitment and more personnel to carry that out.
Will Fries, goodbye training camp, right?
That is what Kevin O'Connell said when I asked him about it last week. Yeah, he had that tibia fracture that was, I think, week 5 with the Colts last year. So ended up missing the whole year. And I think there was, that's a pretty major surgery where you're having to put hardware in to keep everything together. And it sounds like he had to, you have to go get all that taken out at a different part in the recovery process. Is kind of normal stuff. But yes, it sounds like it's probably more likely training camp than anything we see in the next couple of weeks. I don't think they'll push him faster than they need to because they need him to be ready to go. And he's going to be an important part of that whole thing. But yes, I would expect training camp is probably when we will see him for the first time. And then we'll see, when Christian Darrisaw's timeline comes up as well, I would think they'll be cautious with both of those guys to make sure they're ready. But if they are, it's a couple of pretty major upgrades to what they had at the end of last season.
Is this the time of year where you mention, okay, so commitment to the run and connecting dots, J.J. McCarthy, and just trying to support him in any way possible? And, I kind of framed it up where it's kind of the first time I can think of as a Vikings fan in a long time where myself, those that cover the team, the fan base, everyone's like, I don't like this particular thing that's happening. In this case, I'm talking about the run game and what we saw from the interior of the O-line.
Yeah.
It's very rare where all of us collectively in concert are like, that's not great.
Yeah.
And then the coach says, yeah, that's not great.
Right.
And then he goes out and addresses it. To that end, and maybe this isn't the right time of the year, while you're watching this and you're looking at Mason, great addition, by the way, with Jones, are you seeing at this stage of the year maybe in any functional changes where this is a team that keeps a second tight end in the mix more than it has in the past? Or is it just simply too early really to kind of put a stamp on that in terms of a true elemental change maybe to what this thing looks like on the field?
Yeah, I mean, I think a second tight end is certainly going to be part of this thing. I mean, they are very fond of Josh Oliver and the role he plays in this offense. He's not the most dynamic receiving target. He's not certainly TJ Hawkinson in that regard, but I think they want to have a front that can both execute the run and also lure people into heavier personnel packages so that they can throw to Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, Jalen Naylor, whoever happens to be on the field in that group. So I do think Josh Oliver is part of this. I think the second tight end is part of this thing quite a bit. It's also been notable that Jalen Naylor spent a lot of the offseason in the weight room. You can tell. I mean, they have a new strength coach with a little bit of a different approach to things in general, but Jalen Naylor looks pretty jacked up. And
you're familiar with Alec Lewis, right?
I am, yes.
Okay. Well, his hypothesis, and I guess it's backed up.
Yeah.
There's a psychological element to this.
Yeah.
It's simply by nature of the number change.
Yeah.
That makes him look different.
He looks the frame underneath the jersey looks different.
So you're not willing to go that far? Okay.
I don't think it's just a number change. I think he spent the offseason in the weight room. And I bring that up because one of the things they want from their receivers is skillful and engaged run blockers. I mean, you hear Wes Phillips talk about Cooper Kupp all the time in terms of what kind of a blocker he was, what kind of an offensive mind he was, just understanding where he fit in the run game and what you could work off of that. So all of this discussion of marrying the run and the pass, it's more effective if everybody involved in the offense has a role in both of those facets. And I think Jalen Naylor getting bigger is probably a realization of, hey, if I can bring a little more physicality to this offense, it may put me in some situations where I'm on the field and we are throwing out a heavy personnel and I'm in a 2-receiver set.
Yeah.
And I get some targets that way too. So that piece of things, and I don't know that was exactly what motivated it, but I can't imagine it hurts in that regard.
I wonder how much of the contract year plays into it as well.
There's probably that too.
And by the way, regardless of his motivation, the Vikings can benefit from it.
Yeah.
And so if that's truly what it is, final year of his deal, I mean, I think back, KJ had a tough one to end his time year, but it was DJ Wanham. You can think about that. Yep. Fadi Odenigbo going back farther, where these are role players that never found themselves playing 80% of the snaps.
Pat Jones probably a little bit last year.
But man, when it was time to get paid, they had that year.
Yeah.
Maybe this is Naylor's time. So
could be.
Whether it's the number change, maybe it's the weight room. Probably more likely the weight room.
Yeah.
He's looking jacked and he's looking ready to assist. Let's be better on those punts. The Lambeau thing last year, not great, Jalen. Not great. Let's do this. Let's pause, and then maybe we will jump back into JJ. One of your cohorts at the Strib, actually, Andrew Kramer, wrote something up that I want to discuss with you as well, because he hit on a point specifically on the defensive side of the ball that I've been looking at for a couple of years now, and I think that's one of the most important positives that came from Kwesi Adofo-Mensah's offseason moves. Ben Goessling, Star Tribune, StarTribune.com, at Ben Goessling in studio, covers the Vikings. More conversation on the purple next. It's The Fan.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
It is Ryan Seacrest here. There was a recent social media trend which consisted of flying on a plane with no music, no movies, no entertainment. But a better trend would be going to ChumbaCasino.com. It's like having a mini social casino in your pocket. Chumba Casino has over 100 online casino-style games, all absolutely free. It's the most fun you can have online and on a plane. So grab your free welcome bonus now at ChumbaCasino.com. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Don't miss out as your Lynx are back in action Sunday when they take on Paige Beckers and the Dallas Wings at 3 p.m. Catch this game right here on The Fan. And hear every game this season on the Timberwolves/Lynx channel on the free iHeartRadio app, thanks to RBC Wealth Management.
to noon, Nordo in for PA. It's vocal maintenance. Minnesota Vikings heavy conversation here with Ben Goessling, Star Tribune, StarTribune.com. How has Mr. McCarthy looked? I heard one day it was, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I heard one day, he made some mistakes. Isaiah Rodgers rolls in, picks him off on some out route or something like that. And then suddenly I'm seeing on social media, how many games do we give J.J. McCarthy before he's a bust or a star? Hey, it's we saw the same thing with Teddy.
Yeah.
We have a history as it pertains to quarterbacks.
True.
What do you think of Mr. McCarthy?
He's
kind of finding his way.
It looked like he's finding his way. There's a lot to like. I think he looks lively. He's made some throws on the move. He certainly looks like the knee is healed.
Okay.
I don't think there's any concerns that they have about that, especially when he's, I believe, scoring from second and sliding into home in that softball game last week. So I don't think he's terribly concerned about it himself.
I think KO winced a little bit hearing about that.
I would assume so. Yes. I think a lot of those things, we've seen him make some throws over the middle that have been awfully impressive. He's had a few darts to Naylor, a couple of darts to Addison last week. He threw the pick on Monday. It was basically a corner route. It looked like they were in a 2 deep shell. Safety sitting over the top. Isaiah Rodgers is sitting underneath it. Picks it off. Probably one of those throws that was a little aggressive, a little bit of a, let me see if I can put this ball in here and put it in between people. And the thing you always have to figure out with this too, this time of year, is how much of this is, kind of like spring training in baseball, where it's a pitcher saying, I was trying something there that I probably wouldn't do in a regular season game, but I want to see what happens if I push the ball there. And I think Kevin O'Connell has said that part of their approach with J.J. McCarthy this offseason is to say, let's see what happens when we do these certain things, and let's push the envelope to see what you can handle and kind of learn, maybe by touching that third rail, so to speak, of, okay, that's not a good idea. So I think some of the approach has been that. And I think as we watch these things and kind of take note of them, I've tried to keep that in my mind and saying, hey, there may be times where him making this mistake is not because he thinks it was necessarily a good idea that he would do in, week 13 at Lambeau Field or something like that. So
there hasn't been any moments where you're like, my goodness.
No.
Like, what on earth are you thinking?
No, he looks like he has a good understanding of what he's doing. Okay. I think, everybody that's talked about him, Harrison Phillips said it the other day about, the week after he got hurt, he said hey, I noticed you were in a 2-eye technique on this play and then you jumped out to a 4-eye. Why did you do that? What does it mean in the defense? How can we kind of exploit that in terms of a run fit? And so he's been that guy at that level of detail. Everybody you talk to says that. So I think the command of the offense, for having not played, he's done everything he can to catch up on that facet of things. And I think he's done a good job there.
So I mentioned it, Andrew Kramer, one of your cohorts, and he covers the Minnesota Vikings as well. I see him as part of your podcast.
Yes.
You guys do a ton of stuff at the Strib.
Yep.
But he wrote something up on playing time of the D-line specifically.
Yeah.
This is 3-4 days ago maybe. But it's been my argument specifically with Harrison Phillips. And later in the show, I got some audio from him speaking to the media 2 days ago. Yeah, would have been Monday.
Yep.
And he hit on a couple of talkers that I'll reference later as well. But the big thing for me, and Kramer noted this in his article, and PA and I have talked about this, but it's heavy on me. I go back to the Zimmer days.
Yeah.
When you look at ultimately statistically what was an elite defense.
Yep.
But when you look at the reps he was putting on people.
Yes.
And the inability to create a rotation.
Yep.
And now, just like we watched in a hockey game last night, we see it with the best defensive fronts in the NFL where they come in tidal waves, man.
Yep.
The skill doesn't stop. The speed doesn't stop. Strength doesn't stop. And Harrison Phillips, on one hand, I believe it was 2 years ago, you could say, wow.
Yeah.
Harry had the best statistical season of his career.
Right.
And that's awesome. We loved it. We paid for the guy, right? That's what we wanted. But he was playing 75% of the snaps.
Yeah.
And that we hadn't seen that probably in more than a decade. We're talking like Williams, Wall, Kevin Williams style snaps. And Harry just is not built like that.
Right.
And so that's not going to work long term. And you try, we got Tillery in the mix and, we like what some of these guys were doing, but we weren't finding that answer a year ago. His snap counts do actually go down a bit, but ultimately productivity goes along with it. So I loved what Kramer wrote, and I just, where your head is at on now the defensive additions. Now these, talk about, whether it's injuries to Fries, a lot of these guys have, they're coming back from nicks and various injuries from a year ago, but on paper, it feels like that a rotation that we might be as close to it as we could have been in the past half decade with this front, lowering snap counts, maximizing efficiency with the snaps that they do get.
I think that's right, and I think it's important because you have now, in all likelihood, you're going to have to play 20, if not 21 games if you want to reach a Super Bowl, because it's a 17-game regular season, and there are now only 2 of the 14 teams that make the playoffs that get a bye. It's no longer 4, obviously. So most of the teams, and there's going to be at least one team in a conference title game every year playing its 20th game of the year. It used to be that the only time you'd play 20 was if you were in the Super Bowl, and sometimes you could win the Super Bowl playing 19. I mean, that's as recent as 5-6 years ago. That was the case. Now you're talking a minimum of 20 to get there, if not 21. So the number of snaps, especially in those physical playoff games where you can't take guys out because you have to have everybody playing in close games that it's do or die, it does mean that you have to find ways, I think, to add depth and mitigate the wear and tear on those guys, because it's such a physical position that you do see it. I can remember the 2017 season, especially. I mean, that group, that was the best defense Mike Zimmer had. We've talked about it a million times. I think they got outscored, what was it, like 55-19 in the last 6 quarters of those playoffs?
Yeah.
That defense was gassed.
They were done.
And it was the regular season snaps. It was also the way that team practiced. I mean, that team practiced hard in a way that this group does not do. I mean, it is this team now with Kevin O'Connell, they'll have days where they say we need to go hard, but they also are kind of seeing the big picture of, if we went hard yesterday, this guy probably needs some recovery today because we need him to be fresh for the long term. So the practice snaps, I think, added up, and the snaps that you had, Everson Griffin, Danielle Hunter, Brian Robinson, probably more in 2017, but a lot of those guys playing 800-900 snaps through the course of the season, and then maybe another 140, 130 throughout the course of the playoffs. Those things, especially when there's such momentous snaps, those things add up. Yep. And I think having a group that can make it to the playoffs and still be fresh enough to affect games. I mean, heck, you see it with the Eagles just about every year when they've made runs. The Rams have done it. They did it last year. You need a group that can come at you in waves, hits you different ways, and has enough diversity, has enough variety, enough depth that players like Harrison Phillips or Jonathan Allen, who's coming off an injury, or Javon Hargrave, who's coming off an injury, they get some breaks so that they're still fresh when you need them the most. Yeah. I think it's really important.
Part of that would be on Flores, too, ultimately. Yeah. You give him those options, but then he's got to keep to those options, right? Falling into a rut where this absolutely has to be the bit in that moment, but giving him variety and versatility is going to be a big part of that. A couple more for you, and then I'll let you get on to enjoy the day here. Where are you at on this team being finished? I mean, there's been a ton of corner trade-related conversation recently. They have $16-18 million, whatever it is, in cap space. Jalen Ramsey, we've talked that out a bit here on this show. For me, it still kind of feels like we're in gun for hire territory, that we're in camp, and maybe it is a Shaq Griffin type that we would enter back into the mix. That's where my head's at on it. Because you look at the cap numbers next year, they can roll this money over and really assist in kind of alleviating some upcoming problems there.
Yep, they can, and they're going to have to figure out some things there. There's other ways that you can deal with it in terms of some restructures and those kinds of things. But
and Brzezinski we trust.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. He's a magician with what he does. And Emily Battis, his assistant, I know he's talked quite a bit about how much she has helped things as well. So those two in that cap department do a great job, and I think they'll figure out ways to do it. But yeah, if you have space to roll over, that certainly helps the whole process. That said, I do not think they're done. I think if there's something out there that they want, that they feel like will make the team better. I mean, history would suggest that they will go and get it. I mean, last year we saw it in the preseason with adding all the corners, and it was a lot of kind of lower level signings right away. It was Bobby McCain, guys like that came in to add some depth. But then they go get Stephon Gilmore later in training camp. I think if there's something like that they want to do, whether it's Jalen Ramsey or anybody else, if they think there's a fit and they can make it work financially, I don't think they look at this as being done, because they are going to be in a better draft pick spot next year than they were this year, because all of those trades are done that sent all those picks out the door, and you're going to have at least 2 comp picks, maybe 3. I think what you're rooting for, if you want the third one, is Trent Sherfield to be a big part of the Denver Broncos offense. I think there's some incentives in his contract that end up making it so that he would be possibly to get in that comp pick formula. I think that's the variable that could affect this. But whether it's 2 or 3, they're going to be in a better spot with picks.
What's Quasey going to do with all those selections?
Well, some of them.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, you add some depth. They need some guys that are a little more affordable, because you have a lot of veterans on this roster. They need to reset the bottom of it, or the middle class of it, so to speak. But if there's something they want to trade, if you said we want to part with a third in a deal, there's going to be another third coming in next year for Sam Darnold in all likelihood. So I think they have the draft capital to be aggressive if they wanted to make a deal. They have some cash if it's somebody on the open market. No, I don't think there's any reason to believe that they wouldn't do something like that if they feel like there's something that makes sense that's there.
Last thing for you, local angle. You saw Frank Ragnow, who, I mean, just an absolute, you want to talk about Ironmans, but he's a guy that over the last couple of years, it sounds like it's really been a task to kind of put himself back together to be the absolute stone cold badass center that he has been for the Lions. He announces his retirement. I don't believe this was absolutely a shock to the team themselves. I think they drafted a guy maybe with some center flexibility in the second round, as a matter of fact, Ratledge maybe. But for a team that's already going through such significant change, to have one of your anchors have to hang it up, sadly, at such a young age, at 29, I don't think we can. There's no underrating there's no overstating, I think, maybe some of the difficulties the Lions will have to tackle in terms of all of that change, including losing Frank Ragnow.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see what that looks like, because you're right. He has been a force in the middle of that line, and that's been one of the better lines in the NFL. I think that's a big part of the reason they've made the move that they have, because that line is so good and so forceful and able to, they go for it on fourth down as much as anybody in the league. And part of why they've been successful with it is that line can move people and reset the line of scrimmage, establish itself. Frank Ragnow has been a big part of why that's been so successful. So you take him out of the mix. Obviously, Ben Johnson's no longer there. So you have a different set of apparatus, so to speak, around Jared Goff than what he's been successful with to this point. He loses his center. He loses his play caller. You can replace those things, and they'll have to. But I do think that is a major difference. I think how they handle it, and you're right, I don't think this is a surprise to them. I'm sure he gave them some notice, and it's been something that, as he's had injuries, he's, I think, probably looked toward over the last couple of years as well. But when you lose a guy like that, that's been as effective as he has and has set a tone for that group in the way that he's done it, I think that's a big deal. And I think how they respond to it, especially with the way they like to play, is going to be one of those things that may tell the story of how the NFC North shakes out in 2025. It's going to be an extremely interesting division for a lot of reasons. I think how the Lions adjust to some of the changes they've had to deal with is going to be one of those things that makes it particularly fascinating.
Hey, thanks for all the work you do.
Yeah.
Thanks for hanging out with me on a weekly basis. You saw me. I texted her.
Yes.
We're on the key card hunt.
We're working on it.
Is what we are.
Yep.
But looking forward to following your work. And, of course, next week with mandatory minicamp, we're going to have to hear from you again, all right?
Yeah, absolutely. We will have that. And we actually have a very special guest on the Access Vikings podcast today.
Oh, excuse me. Yeah, whether it's podcast, it's newsletter. You have a couple of different angles.
Yep. Newsletter's coming out later this week. Newsletter will be out tomorrow. And then, today on the podcast, it sounds like Quasey may be dropping by to talk with us for a while.
The GM.
The GM is slated to be on the podcast today. So
the fresh re-upped. And of course, as you know, 9 to noon, we would never ask about dollars or years. We wouldn't do that because we don't care. but the newly extended GM is part of your mix. That's going to be awesome.
Should be fun.
So follow at Ben Goessling via X for updates on that and more as he follows the Vikings from OTAs into mandatory minicamp next week. Short segment around the corner. We'll jump to hockey with Russo at the top of the hour. It's Nordo and for PA on the Fan.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Fan.
Chime into what's happening in your favorite KFAN shows. You can make your voice heard on the Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line. So let us know what you have to say by texting your message to 64686. That is 64686. Standard text message and data rate supply.
Yeah, Martin checks in, 64686. Did Oilers Girl make an appearance this year? Who's Oilers Girl?
Are you going to act like you don't know?
I have no idea.
Oilers Girl was a gal in the stands. I think it was a watch party. And to celebrate a win, I believe last year, she did what Chris Hockey would have wanted her to do and revealed
I get it.
What's going on.
All right. I didn't see her. I watched all of game one. I can't confirm that Oilers Girl reappeared, but she's probably very happy. The game one victory.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that. Brock Besser can't play. This is Brandt. He can't play in Minnesota, surrounded by all his buddies. Okay.
I don't think the TV broadcast would have had the cojones to put her on because you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, that would have been weird.
Yeah.
Get an analysis, Eddie O on the mic, and then they just flip to the upper deck. Whoa. Watch out. Guerin has done better with the national team than the Wild. That's Tim in San Diego. The Wild have not done anything under Guerin. Salary cap death was his decision. Love the Wild, but have done nothing in terms of progress. Tage Thompson should absolutely be their best or their biggest target this summer. What do you think about Tage?
I don't hate that at all. I like the way he plays. I think it'd be good scoring depth for the team. I'm all in on Tage if they went for him. Especially guys that come out of Buffalo. Seems like everyone who comes out of Buffalo always looks 5 times better than when they were in Buffalo. It's just a terrible franchise that has been doomed for a long time. So Jack Eichel, first and foremost. Coming out of Buffalo, wins a cup with Vegas a couple years later. So I don't know if he's that level, but
weren't there worries about him?
Oh, there are tons of worries.
From like an injury standpoint. And Eichel was fantastic against the Wild in this year's series as well. But you're right. I thought on the front end, though, there were questions like, okay, this is, and maybe this is the home run swing that we saw Vegas do with an Eichel that we need the Wild to do in terms of finding that difference maker. But there is also, this wasn't perfect with his game in Buffalo. Maybe Tage is Tage a home run swing, would you say?
I'd say it's at least a double in the gap, if maybe not a home run swing, but I like it and I'm in on it 100%. Okay. Yeah, the Wild were in on Eichel, and there was an interview where he said, I thought I was going to Minnesota, but I think it was an injury thing, and I think they were concerned about locker room stuff too because he was crabby about being in Buffalo, a 24-year-old kid who's won his whole life, and they didn't pull the trigger. Vegas did, and they've got a cup to show for it.
Seems like a fair gripe.
Yeah.
I think I like Jack. Kind of wish he was on our team.
Mm-hmm.
Let's pause and reset. I'll ask about home run swings on the ice with Russo. Russo joining us covering Game 1, NHL Stanley Cup Final. And we're going to check in with Russo hockey around the corner, recap last night. And again, as I did earlier, kind of mixing in, looking at this Stanley Cup Final, this rematch, kind of through the lens of what about our team and how our team makes some strides this summer in that direction. Final hour around the corner features Russo next on the.
Are you still quoting 30-year-old movies? Have you said cool beans in the past 90 days? Do you think Discover isn't widely accepted? If this sounds like you, you're stuck in the past. Discover is accepted at 99% of places that take credit cards nationwide. And every time you make a purchase with your card, you automatically earn cash back. Welcome to the now. It pays to Discover. Learn more at discover.com/creditcard. Based on the February 2024 Nielsen report.
Here at the Almond Joy Factory, where tropical vibes abound, we use soft, fresh-tasting coconut.
The crunchiest almonds and delicious chocolate candy.
Ah, but do you know what our most important ingredient is? Sometimes you feel like a nut.
Sometimes you don't.
Almond Joy's got nuts and something even way better than that. Yes, Almond Joy is made with almonds and joy.
It's summer. Time to enjoy long days, lazy nights, and great food. Because Uber Eats has deals all summer long. So, when hunger strikes, don't sweat it. Delicious deals are just a tap away on Uber Eats. Enjoy all your favorite grocery items delivered straight to you. Get ice cream, soda, and snacks from your favorite stores like Wegmans and CVS and make the most of every moment. Now that sounds like a good summer. Order now on Uber Eats. Terms apply. Product availability varies by region. See app for details.
With depression, it feels like every day you're just going through the motions. I wanted something that could help me feel better fast and that also lasts. That's when my doctor told me about Auvelity.
In a study, Auvelity started working for some as early as 1 week, with significant improvements seen on average at 6 weeks compared to placebo.
Auvelity is helping me to feel more like myself. I'm glad I talked to my doctor about Auvelity.
Auvelity is a prescription medicine for adults with major depressive disorder, MDD. Auvelity is not approved for children under 18. Auvelity may increase suicidal thoughts and actions in young adults. Tell your doctor about sudden changes to mood, thoughts, or behavior. Do not take Auvelity if you have a history of seizure, eating disorder, or have abruptly stopped drinking alcohol or taking benzodiazepines, barbiturates, or anti-seizure medicine. Serious allergic reactions can occur. Do not take if you are allergic to dextromethorphan, bupropion, or any of the ingredients in Auvelity. Do not take with MAOIs. High blood pressure, manic episodes, serious eye problems, and dizziness can occur. Report all medicines you take to avoid a life-threatening condition. Do not take Auvelity if you are or may become pregnant. Side effects can include dizziness, headache, diarrhea, feeling sleepy, dry mouth, sexual function problems, and excessive sweating.
Ask your healthcare provider if Auvelity is right for you. Visit Auvelity.com. That's AUVELITY.com. Or call 866-496-2976 for more information.